Hello and welcome to the Bedrock podcast, recording from Dover Air Force Base's Innovation Lab. I'm your host, Alex Griffin, and today I'm joined by a few guests. One, we've got Lieutenant Chaillan Jadashik. He's the Chief Technology Officer at the Innovation Lab here at Dover Air Force Base. And also, a special guest is the Air Force's Chief Software Officer, Mr. Nicholas Chaillan. Mr. Chaillan, thanks for joining us today. We're going to go through a couple things here. We're talking about technology, talking about software, talking about innovation. Mr. Chaillan, for all the listeners out there, he is the first Air Force Chief Software Officer that we've had in our Air Force. Brings an amazing amount of civilian and government experience to the seat. Even started his first startup at 15, which is pretty awesome. Mr. Chaillan, again, thanks for joining us today. I was hoping you could start off and just tell us a little bit from your perspective, from your seat. What are some of the bigger projects that the Air Force has working right now?
Of course, and thank you for having me. I think it's very exciting to see how quickly the Air Force is embracing new software capabilities, cloud, AI, machine learning, deep learning. There is a lot going on, and we have dozens of teams across the Air Force and really across the DoD now moving to DevSecOps. And DevSecOps has been a big focus of mine when I started first at ANS for Miss Lord to push DevSecOps to all of DoD with DoD CIO, and now as a Chief Software Officer, I still very much am the co-lead for the DoD Enterprise DevSecOps initiative, which is really pushing DevSecOps to about 60 DoD programs, empowering teams across business systems, weapon systems, cyber offense and defense, and really ensuring that those teams can have their existing primes and subs have access to DevSecOps. And more importantly, we saved about 100 years of program time across these programs already within a year. And that's demonstrating the value of automation, baked in security, and really showing the benefits of DevSecOps at enterprise scale. And so we created two teams, Cloud One and Platform One. You may have known Cloud One as the former CCE, the Common Computing Environment. Mm-hmm. And Cloud One is really a cloud office team that provides access to Amazon government and Azure Gov Clouds, and really brings unclassified workload and secret workload, and partnered with C2S for the classified side, the TS layer, and then fences for SAP. And then we have Platform One, and Platform One is the DevSecOps team. It's an enterprise service for all of DoD, so we have customers beside the Air Force. And Platform One is about 6-7 months old now, and already has the largest DoD programs, including F-35, GBSD, Aegis in the Navy, and the Joint AI Center, the JAIC, with the DoD CIO, and many others, and really moving those teams into the DevSecOps universe with baked-in managed services. And that's really what we've been learning is the main effort and the time we're spending now is bringing these kind of turnkey solutions to the rest of DoD, so teams can focus on their mission software and not have to rebuild and reinvent all the base layers to get to their ATO, and more importantly, being able to push software directly to the warfighter.
Wow, that's a lot of stuff. So you talk about DevSecOps. For just the average listener out there, how would you explain what that is to just the average person out there?
Yeah, I think it's a funny term, but it's pretty obvious when you think about it. We're really removing the walls and the silos between all these different teams: development, security, SAC, and operation teams with operations ops. And that's really critical to be able to move at a pace of relevance, and if we want to compete with the other nation states. And really, when we think about it, it's really about a lot of automation, removing bottlenecks, trying to automate testing, unit testing, integration testing, OTDT, airworthiness, nuclear surety, as much as we can. It doesn't mean everything will be automated, Obviously, there is a lot of things that cannot be fully automated, or we still very much want to have manual checks in those different processes. But it also means the human can then focus more of his time or her time on what's important in terms of what cannot be automated. And that really streamlines the process, brings what we call the continuous authority to operate, the continuous ATO. And it's a completely different model to accredit the software. It's continuous, so that means we accredit the factory, the software team that has this kind of a DevSecOps pipeline. We call it a DevSecOps pipeline, which is really what takes the software from the beginning to deployment with complete automation. We call that continuous integration, continuous delivery, CI/CD. And really the concept is really to automate the testing gates, the cyber gates, the scans, making sure the code is of quality, passing the DoD requirements, the STIGs, and all these kind of cybersecurity related requirements, but also ensuring the testing is automated. So when you deploy, you know exactly how the software is going to behave. We also wanted to make sure we're not getting locked into a cloud provider or to a specific environment, so we could be agnostic and run the same software on multiple environments, whether it's a cloud provider, whether it's the on-premise, air-gapped, disconnected edge use case, and have the same workload and the same ability to push software across all these environments. And that's why we designed the stack to be agnostic and to make sure we have an abstraction layer that let us deploy the software on any environment, which gives us kind of that DoD-wide reciprocity when it comes to the continuous ATO, so we know that we can trust that the software is going to behave the same, whether it's running on a weapon system or not.
Interesting.
Sir, so you talk a little bit about cloud computing. I just wanted to ask a question, kind of talking about cloud services. A lot of people just kind of think as cloud as data storage. However, it's more of an on-demand availability of, multiple computer resources. Can you tell us a little bit about how the Air Force is tapping into its full potential in terms of data analytics, predictive maintenance, things like that?
No, you're spot on, and I think that's the mistake often made at the beginning of the cloud. People saw the cloud mostly as a way to have elastic storage and compute, which is certainly true, but that's really the beginning or the tip of the iceberg when it comes to a cloud. We call it infrastructure as a service, IaaS, and really that's just compute and storage as a service, which obviously brings a ton of speed and elasticity and flexibility, which is great, and we certainly want that. But like you pointed, there's two layers on top of that. There's platform as a service, and there's software as a service. And of course, there's a bunch of new as a service concepts now on top of that as well, to bring AI, machine learning capabilities as a service as well. So like you pointed, there are a ton of different tools and databases and big data solutions out there that can provide those services as a managed service on the cloud. Elastic, where you pay per consumption, which is much easier to deploy. One of the big impediments to adopt some of these services is due to the fact of the complexity to get those accredited on classified clouds. And that's obviously a problem because most of the meaningful work which we could do using these principles and capabilities would obviously go very quickly to the classified side. And by definition, what I don't want is have a different stack, unclassified versus classified, because you just get behind on the classified side and you have drifts, and then you have the issues with accreditation and flexibility. And so what we ended up doing to solve that problem is look at all these different services, and we use the concept of containers. And a container is very much like a shipping container. You put a piece of software in it, and it's immutable, and you can ship it. And we can accredit containers DoD-wide all the way to SAP. And so the Platform One team is responsible for accrediting all of the DoD containers. So instead of using some of these software capabilities as a service on unclassified clouds, which will be limited to unclassified workload and data, we can take the same capability, put it into a container, and now bring it to all of the classification levels. And so we benefit still from the elasticity of the cloud providers that are on the classified side as well, but we bring the logic and the automation and the platform with us, and that's empowering the teams to have the same stack across all classification levels.
Interesting. So, these days, a large portion of our force has kind of found themselves, working from home in this new normal or new abnormal, whatever phrase you want to use. And a big part of that is teleworking. And so from your perspective, what kind of from the software development or the infrastructure development, what's the future of that look like for us?
Yeah, so I've been very impressed by the teams and their ability to shift entirely their mindset, right? The culture shift when it comes to moving to mostly 99% on-premise or face-to-face meetings with teleworking. And it's obviously not an easy shift, which required not only policy changes but also technology changes within both the Pentagon and outside of the Pentagon at the base layer as well. And so one of the very interesting return on investment of Platform One has been the ability for Platform One to spin up a chat. So we spun up an FOUO, Mattermost chat, so all the teams across the DoD can connect and collaborate within 2 days. We had the chat up and running 28 hours after the beginning of the crisis, and that demonstrated the value of DevSecOps and the ability to accredit software very quickly. This was not something planned. This was something built based on the issue within 24 hours and accredited and up and running within 28 hours, which is pretty exciting. And that demonstrated the value of DevSecOps and the platform, and not having to reinvent the wheel when it comes to accrediting the whole stack and really focusing on your application layer. And so we were able to spin up that chat, and we have 60,000 users using it within, I would say, 2 weeks, which was pretty incredible. Wow. Not using CAC and not using GFE devices, which was also a big enabler for teams that didn't have access to a GFE device or didn't have access to their CAC readers. And so I think what we're going to be seeing now is following the big deployment from DoD CIO and the Air Force CIO using Office 365, not using CAC and not using GFE devices as well. We're going to see this as becoming the norm and providing access to more and more of these services. I think there is a big shift and quite a bit of work that has to be done on the policy side of the cyber side of the house to enable these teams that had temporary waivers to be able to use some of these capabilities today. So that has yet to be completely described what that means in terms of changes, because we don't know yet if are we going to still be able to use non-CAC authentication, or are we not going to be able to do that down the road? So there's still a little bit of gray area there. But what's exciting is I think we're getting access to all the right tools, collaboration tools, chats, video chats, re-enabling a lot of the thing that used to be disabled on our devices. That does create a cyber risk, so we have to be careful right now going from one extreme to the other. I think there's a middle ground somewhere to balance cyber security and making sure we don't just give away our data and IP to not being able to move at the pace that makes sense for the DoD, right? And so I think it's still something that we have to figure out. But I'm pretty excited to see that people have changed their mindset, and it's going to be, kind of the new norm.
Interesting. Yeah, you talk about balancing that cyber risk. Sometimes for the average airman out there, sometimes this is difficult to balance that security with ease of use or functionality. How do you approach something like that?
Well, I think where I'm lucky is I'm a developer myself, but I'm also a cyber guy. So I kind of have the two hats, and I play with that a lot because I put myself in the shoes of both the end user and also the the cyber team that has to assess the risk. And it's difficult, right? I think obviously they're two very competing issues. And when you think about it, you could have a very secure system, but if you cannot move fast enough and adopt new technologies, new AI machine learning capabilities, you're just going to get so far behind that in effect you're creating a cyber risk, right? By not being able to move at the pace of relevance, like we call it, right? And so it's very interesting. I keep saying a lot to cyber people in DoD that you can be as secure as you want, but if you can't move fast, you're going to get behind, and if you get behind, you have a cyber risk that's actually bigger than not moving, right? And so that opens some people's eyes when it comes to balancing the ability to move fast and react to change. One of the big things we've done with Platform One, with the automation of the containers I was talking about, we can update these containers centrally and push them across all classification levels, across all these different DoD programs within minutes. And you can imagine the value of being able to update a piece of software, whether it's an operating system, whether it's a commercial product or open source software. All those can be updated within seconds, if not minutes. And that gives us the ability to react to events. So if there's a 0 day, or there's a new vulnerability, we can patch and update the systems across all these environments, across classification levels in minutes. And that, by definition, brings security, right? But then people can see that as a risk too, because if someone managed to tamper with those containers, obviously you have a cyber risk there. So there's a balance, obviously, that's tough to find. And the key for me is all about speed. If you can react fast and detect issues fast and react fast, and you fail fast but not twice for the same reason, then you're agile. And if you're agile, you can mitigate risk faster than what could be an impediment to you moving fast.
Interesting. Yeah, that agility is everything.
Sir, you mentioned open source software. So originally, a lot of big tech companies saw that as a risk, and now they kind of shifted to a new culture from completely against it to becoming largest contributors. Do you see the Air Force following this similar culture shift and actively contributing to open source?
Absolutely, and in fact, the entire Platform One stack and the entire DevSecOps stack is 100% based on open source software. I think there was a two different story there. Some companies saw, open source as a business risk, not so much as a cyber risk. They liked to pretend it was for cyber reasons, but the fact is they were afraid those open source projects were going to, cannibalize their business sales and their revenue, right? And at some point, those projects became so big that there was no denying that they had to participate, which, was not ideal for some companies, because now they had to do a 360, a 180, and now start to participate within these projects to still be relevant. And obviously, a lot of companies have done a great job at doing that switch. One of them, Microsoft, is now, like you said, completely embracing the open source community and collaborating natively with those teams and adding members baked into those teams. We've done the same thing. The entire source code repo of Platform One is open source. It's called Repo One. It's accessible, from the internet, and anyone can go and see the code and the containers and all the security we're doing, because we know that by having more eyes on the code, we are more secure, right? It's actually a myth to think that obfuscation can bring any security. In fact, when we've done any pen tests, including the more recent ones organized by Dr. Roper at DEF CON last year, white hat hackers managed to get into a DoD system that they had never seen before, supposedly using, DoD custom software that has never been seen before by those people, and they managed to get complete admin access within 4 minutes, including sometimes dozens of exploits to get in to the same system with different ways. And so that demonstrated to the world that obfuscation and closed source code doesn't bring any security. At best, it brings the faith on trusting that source code when in fact you don't have any evidence that it's not vulnerable to begin with, right? So it's actually counterproductive to even be hiding it, because in effect you're just worried about what is actually behind that source code. If you actually trust it, you have no problem open sourcing it and getting feedback, right? Very much like anything in life. So we are 100% behind the open source community. We are contributing back to all the open source projects we are using. In fact, we have several teams on contract as well to push back fixes based on what we find on open source projects during scanning or by using them, including new modern DevSecOps products, open source projects. So that's been quite the ride. Where we need to do better is when it comes to civilian and military personnel to be able to push back code to open source projects. It's still very difficult to get the code released, to be released publicly when it was actually written by the government personnel, even though by definition, being written by the government personnel gives you no IP rights. There's still that notion of classification that has to be understood, and making sure we're not publishing any code that will have any kind of national security risk. That's where we need to do better. So that's why we use a lot of contractors to do that work for us.
Interesting. So, if I think about airmen at the kind of the wing level, if we bring it all the way down, even to the squadron, what can airmen in the kind of the cyber communications squadron, how can they best support your vision?
Well, I think we're going to try to really help them first, and that's by bringing tools that they all are trying to access that often are blocked at the base layer or blocked due to cyber issues that are often inaccurate. And so we want to try to bring an environment on the cloud at different classification levels for these teams to be able to first do their daily work. And that will include access to all the different cyber tools and the SecOps tools, including source code repo, scanning tools, planning tools, and we're buying in bulk to help at least the software teams out there, so they don't have to reinvent and go acquire all these different licenses, and provide it as a DevSecOps stack, managed stack with an ATO day one on platform one. We have about already dozens, I would say, of teams consuming what we call the party bus, which is this multi-tenant environment where we are managing it for the teams, and they can just come and consume. We're going to make that easier to access with time and funding. Right now, it's kind of a pay-per-use model where each team pays for their license and participates in the platform one funding to grow faster together. And consolidating and buying licenses in bulk obviously brings the massive discount. And then once they have access to the environment, because everything is open source, we can have a two-way street with the teams when it comes to maybe having those teams contribute back to the platform one source code to improve it, add more capabilities, add more features, fix things, and make sure that the cyber side of the house is as documented as it can be, to make sure the adoption of these tools are more and more streamlined down the road.
So I want to shift gears a little bit here and kind of talk about the Internet of Things, or as most people know them, smart devices. We have our smart lights, our smart camera home systems, locks. That's kind of become popular in this whole smart home movement. Now, there's a lot of those devices and sensors that we can actually utilize to provide us with valuable data and insights when integrated within different systems. So how is that something moving forward that we can, provision, update, manage, and kind of authorize these types of devices on a larger scale?
Yeah, I think you're touching one of my next big focus on this year. I think there's two sides of this, right? There's a software piece and the hardware piece. The software piece, I think we know, and we have the ability on the DevSecOps environment to write code for IoT devices. We're supporting 16 programming languages, including the more modern AI machine learning programming languages as well. So we can pretty much do anything when it comes to the software side and making sure the code is going to work on IoT devices as far as a jet, right? So we are running containers and Kubernetes, which is what's running containers on F-16 jets, on legacy hardware. And we asked the team to do this in 45 days. And in 45 days, you had Ada, Java. Well, what used to run C and Ada is now running Java, Python, and Go on the same hardware on the F-16 jet, right? So we demonstrated that the abstraction and the ability to run software on any environment is possible, including on IoT devices or edge devices. The next tougher piece is honestly a little bit outside of my world, which would touch more on the hardware side. And as you know, with hardware, there is obviously tampering and sourcing and bill of material considerations when it comes to where all the different pieces of the hardware came from. Whether it's a drone, whether it's an IoT device, there are pieces coming from China and other countries, which obviously could be a problem. And so it's been still, I think, the number one impediment as far as how can we rapidly assess a piece of hardware and know for a fact that the hardware can be trusted and can be used in a DoD environment. And honestly, I don't have the answers yet on that. There are a few pockets of DoD tackling that problem. Unfortunately, it usually comes at a cost of time, which could be, sometimes a year or 2 years, which is obviously a non-starter when it comes to innovation around IoT devices. And so unless we have an ability to rapidly assess hardware, and I'm talking about weeks, not months, then I think we're just going to get behind. But at the same time, that's where I would be very cautious to just ignore the risk and put our hand in the sand and just use the hardware without truly understanding the risk in terms of the cybersecurity piece there on the hardware side.
All right. Well, Mr. Chaillan, is there anything else you'd like to pass along to our audience?
Well, I think we want to get feedback. So we're launching, you're going to see quite soon, quite a few websites coming from Dr. Roper's office that are trying to gather feedback in terms of what we can improve, what we can do better. We really want to, get to understand better impediments, bottlenecks. Sometimes it's about briefing people on DevSecOps and how we accredit software today, which we do a lot. We probably briefed many of the Air Force authorizing officials, but they also have teams. And so if you find bottlenecks, if you have issues with your software accreditation, with using open source software, with using modern programming languages, using modern cyber tools, reach out to my office. We have two websites. One website that's the software.af.mil website, software.af.mil, software.airforce.mil. That's the CSO website, and we have Ask Me Anything sessions every 2 to 3 weeks where people can join and ask questions live to me. The next one is actually on Friday, but we do that every 3 weeks or 2 weeks sometimes. And there's a ton of training content videos. There's a lot of content created on DevSecOps and Agile and acquisition stuff. And then we are launching an idea box where people will be able to drop either complaints or idea, anonymously or not, to give us feedback when it comes to acquisition, DevSecOps, software, cyber, data, AI, machine learning, funding issues, when it comes to Dr. Roper's engagements. And so love to get more feedback and love to get a community of practice to grow. We have about 1,500 members in the DevSecOps COP, community of practice. We also have an email, usaf.cso@mail.mil. So US Air Force, usaf.cso, Chief Software Office @mail.mil. and that's gonna be the place where you can send any question, any concerns, or if you need help with any software related problems, whether it's on the cloud, on premise, whether it's open source or not. That's where we can help you. So really want to be here as a resource, and we want to make sure we're not living in a vacuum. And often being at the Pentagon, this is what happens, right?
Sure.
So we want to make sure we have direct access. So never hesitate to shoot us an email. Join the Ask Me Anything events. Dr. Roper is doing his Ask Me Anything events every month. The CSO is doing it every 2 to 3 weeks. So you can come and directly ask questions. We do not filter questions. We try to answer every question as openly as we can. So please join us.
All right, that sounds great. Well, Lieutenant Jadashik, thank you so much for joining us today. And Mr. Chaillan, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us on the Bedrock podcast.